grab some wheels. We'll whale along and talk about some cuckoo deals.
But Kooky, Kooky, lend me your comb. Kooky, Kooky.
And it was really a fun story, fun program. And we have the old comb, and trying to adjust my hair here. Thank you very much. There's a quiz here. The quiz is for $50. If someone can tell me, I gave you the name of one singer. His name was Ed Burns. His real name was Gerald Lloyd Cookson III. So Cookie came from his name, obviously, Cookson to Cookie. And there was another person singing that part of the song, and it was a woman. So the amount of money will be $50 for someone who can tell me who that woman was. And I'll give you a hint. Her name was Conchetta Rosalie Ann Ingoglia. Now, it's not going to be easy for you to figure this out by going to Google, because you don't know how to spell Ingoglia. And the chance of getting the name from those three initials, or at least Conchetta Rosalie Ann, is very difficult. My mother's first name was Conchetta. It was very interesting that this woman was the same. Well, anyway, my hair is obviously very thin. I have a special comb here. It has 100 teeth because I have only about 15 or 20 hairs on my head. My wife does not like my comb over. My daughter, my son, he's neutral. But my granddaughter absolutely loves it. She teases it. It actually stands up about this high. So she has a great time with it. I don't like hats in the summer. And if you don't wear a hat with a bald head, you're in real trouble. So I don't like to sweat, and so I'm growing my comb over until it happens, and hopefully it will. About probably 0.1% reduction in the amount of sun going to my head. Now that is similar to the 0.1 percentage of energy we get from the sun as part of our total energy in the United States. And the wind power also, it contributes about 1%. So currently we contribute 1.1% of our total energy needs via both wind power and solar power. Obama, of course, said that he's going to double it, and then we'll end up with 2.2%. And God forgive us if we can live with all of that energy that we're going to get. So there's a big gap about perception and what is reality. During this past, well, who am I guess? Tonight we have a little glitch here. We don't have the phone number of the studio. So the number is here. It is 781-944-8888. Hi, I'm Johnny Straight Talk Russo, and I'm broadcasting live from the RCTV Community Access TV studio of Reading, Massachusetts, USA, Earth, and the Milky Way. This is a live call-in talk show, and you can call at the number, which you don't see right now, but I will repeat it throughout the show. Or you can call my cell number, which is 781-389-6879 after the show. All messages left on my phone are property of John F. Russo. My motto is always, the way Massachusetts should be, according to me, of course, because it will cost less. This past week, or about 10 days, there was a program at the high school called After Laramie. This will be an introduction before I have my debate. We are going to have a debate tonight. After about 9 months of seeking a person who would be willing to come to the show to at least engage, I am a conservative, and I was looking for a liberal Democrat. And right here, there's a sign here encouraging all kinds of people to come. I have a double header here. Not only is a Democrat, but she's a liberal, which is great. And her name is Carolyn Osborne. But anyway, during this past week, there was a program called After Laramie. It was not advertised in either paper, but there were about 2 articles by the paper and 2 letters to the editor in that same, in the Chronicle. The bottom line was that it is about victimization and promotion of homosexual lifestyle. And the book that describes this strategy, even though it may not be perceived that way, is a book that is the blueprint for the homosexual movement. It's called After the Ball. It's published, it was authored by Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen. In fact, one or both have already died from AIDS. This is the entire strategy that's been used successfully for the last 10 years. And some of the things they talk about here is, for example, they'll talk about making gays look good. It also talks about making sure the victimizers look bad. Anyone who disagrees with their position to be looked as if they are the bigots, etc. And we have this is the program. Now, another gentleman who is also a great spokesman, his name is Andrew Sullivan, and I want to talk about him briefly because Andrew Sullivan is a homosexual activist, was formerly the editor of the New Republic, and has been a spokesman periodically over the years. And one of the most important things that he says, it's rather unusual for him to say something like this. And I quote from his book called Virtually Normal by Andrew Sullivan. And he says on page 44, homosexuality is a structural condition which, even if allied to a renunciation of homosexual acts, disbars a human being from such a fully realized life. The gay or lesbian person is disordered, I want to repeat that, is disordered at a far deeper level than the alcoholic. So here's someone who admits this condition. And so we start off with that piece of information. The responses for this program at the high school, there were only two churches that were recorded in the paper. One was the Unitarian Church, led by Mr. Kutzmark, I finally got the right pronunciation, whom I met, in fact, and I shook his hands, and I've invited him to the program at least a few times, and I asked him a direct question. He said maybe. So I don't hold out much hope because he's known that I've been interested in having a discussion with him here publicly for quite a while. The other gentleman is, or rather church, is St. Athanasius, which is a Catholic church, and that's run by Father Bill Kreml. The youth leader, Jennifer Campagna, she wrote a letter to the Chronicle, and the letter read as follows. I'm quoting from the letter. I feel that it is important for all youth to know that God loves them unconditionally, and no matter what their sexual orientation is, we are all God's children. That is a true statement, but the one part of the statement she neglects to talk about is whether she affirms this condition or not. And I would like to have that kind of comment responded to. So anyway, we'll leave it up to Jennifer to some point in time to discuss that, because according to the church, the Catholic Church anyway, we love all people, regardless what state of their condition is. And if they pursue activities like homosexuality, in terms of acting on those sexual urges, is considered to be a sin. That's for Catholics. That doesn't apply to anyone else. But it's very important to realize there is a difference. One is there are many homosexual people, but the only aspect that is a problem is acting on those impulses. The non-sponsors for this program, after Laramie, which was unusual, is a Congregational church, and the Congregational church actually has a strip right across the name of its church on this board with the rainbow, obviously welcoming anyone of the homosexual orientation or at least inclination. The Baptist church, the Methodist church, no other churches were involved except for the Catholic Church and also the Unitarian Church. One other church that was not was St. Agnes Church, which is a church I belong to. They have not taken part in any of these events. I asked a question at this event. The question was, According to a Minnesota study, there were about 30,000 children of the ages 11 to 13. And this study was about 10 years ago. And of those 30,000, 25% of them were not sure of their sexual inclination. So I asked the board, there were about 70 people there, there was a panel. I asked them, what would you tell a child that would come to you and say that they did not want to continue on with these inclinations that they had? They had unwanted inclinations. I did not get really an answer to that. I also asked them if there was any objection, or rather any understanding of the ex-gay movement. And the transgendered person on the panel said, well, once you have this condition, you can't change. And that led to a second question I asked later on, where I made the statement that Dr. Robert Spitzer, who was one of the gentlemen on the 1973 board of the American Psychiatric Association, which delisted homosexuality as a disorder. He was there at the time. 10 years later, he had a study of about 200 homosexuals who were interested in changing their sexual inclination, and quite a few of them did succeed in changing their orientation. So that was discussed, and then later on another gentleman asked another question. The question was this: homosexual marriage and heterosexual marriage are equivalent today under law in Massachusetts. If they teach about heterosexual sex in the health education program in the school system, then they will have to teach about the safety of homosexual acts. Under law, you cannot discriminate. Immediately after this question was asked by somebody in the audience, a woman who was a Unitarian said they were not going to teach my children about anal sex or of that kind of activities. Well, sorry to say, she can opt out of these classes, but shortly in the legislature there's a health curriculum frameworks which will be possibly approved. The homosexual movement strongly is in favor of continuing to proselytize and indoctrinate other children into this lifestyle. This framework will be a requirement of every student. There will be no opting out. These are the things that are happening, even though they say the sky's not falling, but wait till you see what's going to happen. So this is very important to realize this is going to happen, and you cannot stop it. The only way of taking your child out of school is by simply going to a private school, and until vouchers are accepted, which they will not allow, they will go to that school or be homeschooled. Anyway, this happened, and there were a couple of major people who have left the homosexual lifestyle. One was Michael Glatz, approximately 5 years ago. He was the co-founder of a periodical called Young Gay Americans. He left this lifestyle, and it's rather instructive to see what he says about this. He says, and this was quoted in Time magazine, "I don't think the gay movement understands the extent to which the next generation just wants to be normal kids. The people who are getting that are the Christian right." He is now a member of the Mormon Church. The second person, who was also a high-profile individual, was a woman by the name of Miss Coltrane. She founded Venus magazine, and likewise, she also came out of her homosexuality through a Christian action. Now, I've asked, now to the program tonight, I asked quite a few times in this program, from the beginning, I was looking for people to come here to discuss with me, I'm a conservative, why do you believe in what you believe, and can you defend it? None have come. There's obviously a lack of courage. I came to this town thinking there was a lot of professionals in this town. But obviously, you may be a professional, but you don't have the courage, and maybe not even a cognitive ability. Maybe I've overestimated your ability. We're here to have a comfortable discussion about things that make the difference between what you believe and what I believe. I'm here to persuade you, and maybe you want to try to persuade me. Either way, it's fine with me. I've asked Paula DiGiovanni, who's written letters to the paper. She responded, but she's never accepted. Her daughter, though, had quite a bit of courage. Paula DiGiovanni came and talked on a telephone, and she was quite good. I also debated Lauren DiGiovanni. So the family is quite an activist family, and I wish people on my side could really view this family, which is growing activists, real activists who are not afraid to speak up and speak. And this is very important. Elaine Webb, I've invited the school committee. None have shown up. I've also invited the bakers in this town. Jean Prado, who I just met, and also Camille Anthony. I've asked them to tone down their fat content of their food. We have enough obesity in this town. Of course, you know, I'm kind of keeping it lighthearted, but the point is this, that you have an obligation to try to make food that is low in caloric content. As we know, one of the fastest growing diseases in the United States is diabetes. And I have diabetes, so I know what it means. It changes your whole life. It also increases your health costs tremendously. Stephen Villegas, who is the leader of the Democratic Party, didn't even have the courtesy to return my call. Twice I called him. So obviously he's a man of not much courage, and also not interested in being courteous to a fellow Readingite, and I've been in this town for about 30 years. Well, tonight we will meet the person who's going to have a conversation with me. Her name is Carolyn Osborne, and she's coming right now. Carolyn?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering, and you are an exception.
Well,
Carolyn is not a Reading resident,
no.
but I've known her for quite a while, and we've had numerous discussions over the years. This is the first time before TV, a little shaky a little bit, but I'm trying to make sure that we keep the conversation polite, and it is going to be polite.
Absolutely.
In fact, all of my information that I have, I've given to her, though sometimes I may miss something, I may be speaking, I may not have everything. But she saw my last show, and she knows me reasonably well at this point in time, in addition to what she already knows. And so we're going to discuss first our backgrounds, and then we'll go into the program itself. And I'll start, if you want, so to give you an idea of what I'm going to be talking about, to keep it brief.
All right. Don't forget,
Go ahead.
I do want to ask, I was listening, but I should have made a note of, you were speaking about normal lifestyles when you were speaking
this
of,
was a book by Andrew Sullivan.
Right.
It's called Virtually Normal.
Right.
That's his title, and he's an actual practicing homosexual.
And he says he wants, which I agree, a normal life.
Well, that person
that's where
was
I
really,
lost you.
yeah,
That's where I lost you.
that was Michael Glatz.
Right. And
What he said is that I don't think the gay movement understands the extent to which the next generation just wants to be normal kids.
the next generation of gay people.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right, and I think that's valid.
Right.
I think
Right. And
people just want to be
Right. Let me
people.
say to everyone here, I would not like to be conflicted as these people are in many cases. Some of them are not.
Problematic.
Yes, it is a problematic condition. Problematic condition for alcoholics, drug addicted, depression. All these people have difficulties living in life.
But I don't know why you're associating a sexual inclination with alcoholism and drug addiction.
Well,
to me, that is very bizarre.
Well, it may be, but here is a homosexual who made that connection for me.
But one homosexual speaks for all homosexuals?
No, not at all. Not at all. But many professionals in the field, and the other things are the number of ex-homosexuals that I mentioned to you, is that these people...
And why did they become ex-homosexuals?
Well, because just like Michael Glatz, where I mentioned to you, is that if you... I only had this brief article. He just simply was felt that he wasn't a whole person, literally.
And is that the society or his own problem with his own sexuality?
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up, if I could digress for a moment. After the program that we had at Beyond Laramie, that was after Laramie, there were 2 or 3 homosexual leaders there from around the state. And we were having discussions. In fact, the best program I enjoyed was discussing things with them.
Right.
There was without identifying him and without even giving his gender, this person discussed that with us about the violence associated with homosexual activity, or at least relationships. There's data, and he admitted that there's a great preponderance of information indicating that the homosexual lifestyle between either two women or two men has quite a substantial amount of domestic abuse.
Really? Oh, I'd like to see the
this was
paper.
his,
I'd not take his
right.
word for
Here's
it.
a person
but
who's
see
a
his-
leader. Of course, you're taking my word for it. I don't have a tape
This is
recorder. He
true.
wouldn't want it. But he said that.
Oh, I want to see his statistics, not yours.
No, I don't
Go
have
on.
any, but I'm
That's
just
all right.
using him as an
Okay.
example. But I said to him, you know, what's strange is that these statistics don't alter much, even for those people in San Francisco.
Okay.
I said that, and he said nothing other than simply, when someone doesn't say anything, it's obvious to me that he was very uncomfortable with that question I made and the conclusion I came to, but he did not disagree with me.
Well, the question I'd have, not having anything in front of
Right.
me, is I'd like to see the statistics in violence in heterosexual and homosexual. I'm not pro con. I mean,
Right,
it's,
right.
But I would like to see a broader. You
That's
know,
fine, but I was just giving you some
Understood.
interaction here because I don't interact with them that often. When I do, I keep on learning different things about what's happening. So I'm just
Right.
answering your question there about that.
No, it's just strange to hear because when I lived in Vancouver from 2002 to 2007 because my mother was ill. And where she was close to a large gay community. And of course, I spent my adolescence in San Francisco, where it was no big deal. And it's tolerated. There's gay marriage, whatever I may think of it. I mean, you know, it's there. And people didn't seem to me particularly violent, and I knew a number of the people, or conflicted, I think because it was accepted by society and they could just be normal people having, you know, a slightly different lifestyle, probably a little more promiscuous, but maybe not.
You make another point.
But
That's
maybe
another
not
condition.
in the modern world. Maybe not
Yeah.
at all.
But it is-
I'm not so convinced anymore.
Yeah.
You could in the 60s you might have made an argument, but could you make an argument nowadays?
Yes,
I
you
don't
can.
know you can.
I have 3 or 4 books written by homosexual activists.
But they're only promiscuous with each other. Why should that be our business? Unless it spreads disease.
That's
and
another
then-
situation that's misunderstood or at least underestimated. That when this gentleman here talks about, and I didn't want to get into too deep into that, but
All right.
this gentleman here said in one of his statements, and maybe I can find it.
How old is this man?
This
'Cause,
man
you know,
here
the
right
younger
now,
generation doesn't seem
he's
to have
about-
the hang-ups
He's
of
about
the people my age, for example.
probably about 60. This was written in 1995.
That's around my age. That's when everyone
1995.
was conflicted about that. No one's as conflicted anymore. I mean, that's a generational thing to a large extent.
Well, let me tell you, I quote from his book here, and this is, by the way, the studio number is 781-944-8888. Call in anytime.
He's an old generation person.
Yeah.
He's mine. I'm 63,
Well,
so
yes,
I know.
this is interesting. There is more likely to be greater understanding of the need for extramarital outlets between two men than between a man and a woman. And,
Aha, okay.
and then he also states...
Well, men are different.
Right. There's a lot more promiscuity, if you want to use that word.
Among men in general,
men.
probably.
That's true.
Whether they're heterosexual
But-
or homosexual, I would think. We know this.
Right, exactly. But
Men are by nature somewhat promiscuous.
let me give you some other data which you do not have. There's a 1972 gay rights platform.
Yes.
And after that, we'll go into the others because I didn't
Okay,
want to
no,
go
no,
too
no,
deep
I'm
into
sorry.
this.
I didn't
No, that's
either.
okay.
I didn't mean
that's,
for it to
that's
go
a
on
valid
so
question. I didn't show you this, but because I wasn't intending to get into it this deep. But might as well go at it here. In 1972, all of the homosexuals throughout the United States got together,
Right.
and there was a meeting in Chicago called the 1972 Gay Rights Platform,
Uh-huh.
and they created that. Now let me just show you on this page here, and you can take this with you, what they had written down. And this is 1972.
Right. This was after
Repeal-
the Stone thing.
Yeah,
Oh, God, what was the
repeal-
name of that? And
Of all legislative provisions that restrict the sex or number of persons entering into a marriage unit, and the extension, etc. So in other words, they don't want to have any barriers in marriage. They want to have an open condition where they can have multiple partners, and that certainly doesn't lead to commitment.
well, that talks about polygamy.
It doesn't say anything about that.
Well, no, but it's
that's-
polygamy
yeah,
if you marry
yeah.
more than one
Right.
person.
That's true.
Isn't it?
Well, there's two kinds,
So-
polygyny and polyandry, and there's another word
Right.
too.
But the point is, you know, in this country we only allow one-to-one.
Well, it was changed.
Well,
by
nothing
this-
has changed. This is what they want. A lot of people
Yes.
want things.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of gay people are not activists.
The most of the quiet ones, but the leading, most aggressive and radical are the leaders who are changing the world upside down.
Often.
Yes,
That was true
that's
with
exactly
women's
right,
rights,
right.
too.
In fact, the last thing I'll say about this, and then we continue on.
Prohibition and everything
Repeal
else.
of all laws governing the age of sexual consent.
Well, I mean, that's just rather ridiculous.
Well, it may be, but let's face it, 10 years ago, it was ridiculous to consider a homosexual marriage. It was it wasn't even a radar. It was not even on a radar.
Well, it obviously was.
Well, it became that way, but it shows you how fast they've been able to effectively convince everyone else. Anyway, so
Whatever.
let's talk about our background here.
Okay.
Did you give your background? Well, I haven't finished mine, I guess.
No, you didn't
I
even
grew-
start yours. I
was ready.
interrupted
Okay,
you. I'm so
that's okay.
sorry.
Okay. I was born in Chelsea in 1941, and I lived in Chelsea until I was 23 years of age. I was in a low-income family. My parents were immigrants from Italy. I took a path of education, and I eventually got 3 degrees through most of my own work, but also I had Polaroid Corporation, a fine corporation, which is no longer in business anymore, contributed to my entire MBA that I got. But there were loans I did get and continued on from there. I grew up in a liberal family, liberal Democrat family that voted for only Italians. If you were Italian, you voted Italian. If you're Irish, you voted for Irish. So anyway, I continued on with that mainstream thinking in my family until I was in the early 40s. And that time, there was a transition. And when I made that transition to a conservative, actually I was a Republican for a couple of years, but my real change came with Perot. Ross Perot came on the scene in 1992.
Yes, he did.
And I jumped on that bandwagon. I actually had my signs. I was down at the Common, and that was my transformation. It was a combination of a number of things, but it was getting that way where neither party, I felt, were looking for the best interest of our nation. In fact, the best, data I can give you in evidence that we need more than 2 parties, much more so than in the Perot days, is that our financial crisis was created and is going to be sustained by our 2 parties that we have in system. They're up to their eyeballs in both contributing. They have taken turns. They've created this. They've got jobs forever with these financial institutions. They are together. And this is what's most important, is corruption goes very deep. It's all part of the way things are done in Congress. So I highly recommend you consider another party, and what party I belong to now, since the Reform Party under Perot kind of dissipated, I do belong to the Constitution Party, and it's the 3rd largest party in the United States, and it promotes following the Constitution. You may think that's a funny way of, belonging to a party, but our constitutional rights are going to be eroded mostly by the liberal Democrats and also by the Supreme Court, of 4 judicial appointees, and even people who are on the conservative side, like Anthony Kennedy and Sandra Day O'Connor, both appointed by Republicans. They cited foreign laws, and this is the direction we're going. They want to be able to make our Constitution subservient or subordinate to the UN and the UN is going to be the law of this land unless a lot more people rise up against what's happening.
Oh, background.
That was fast.
That was
Right.
fast. Background, I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia. I left to come here. My father was American. He died. My mother and I came to Los Angeles, and so I was brought up until 18 between LA, San Francisco, and Vancouver. I came east when I was 18 on my own. Got married at 25, and by and large have lived in the East most of my life. In New York for 7 years, and then Boston area.
And your political...
Oh, a political affiliation. I was somewhat of an independent, leaning, of course, somewhat towards Democrat, but had issues. And I registered as an independent and then registered as a Democrat in 1992 because of basically the rather self-righteous conservative Christians. And the Tom DeLay, what's his name? The guy that
from
wrote,
Texas.
Yeah, those kinds of people. And that.
Yeah, he was a Senate Majority Leader, I believe.
Yes.
Right.
And what's his name? The third wave. Not.
The religious leader?
No, the guy that he's still around. The guy that got Congress together, that knew how to use the power of Congress.
Well, there's
He's
a number
still
of them.
there. No, but he was the top one. The Things for America, Contract with America.
Oh, Contract with America. Oh,
Yeah, that
Newt
guy.
Gingrich.
Yeah, that guy.
Okay. He's really not religious.
No, but he had
He had
I felt he had a rather mediocre mind. But anyway, whatever.
The program was entitled The New Anti-Americans. In fact, I apologize that we did not have our slide. There was a glitch. You got to remember, this is the amateur hour, and that's all I can say. You know, this is a homegrown show, and glitches happen. It's the first time it's ever happened. I did not have somebody who knows how to run that part of it is not here. And the title of this program is The New Anti-Americans, the Democrats. Originally, I entitled the show as follows: Democrats promote irresponsibility. And as I accumulated the data, it came to me very clearly that it was more than simply promoting irresponsibility. They were actually promoting undermining this country. I call them the fifth column. And so that happened as it is. And the phone number here is 781-944. So we've had two glitches here. 944-8888. You're welcome to call. And so far we have a guest here who is willing to discuss her liberal Democrat viewpoint. I'm a conservative, and we're having our first discussion. This is the first time in the last 9 months that someone finally came to the table here.
Okay, and speaking of undermining America, and the Democrats have put forth, you know, certain programs I don't particularly agree with, but I mean, in terms of completely undermining America, I mean,
That's a strong statement, I guess.
I would look towards the rather greedy Republican Party. You know, America's not here in its present position because of the Democrats. It seems to be here because
a Republican. Not
yeah,
that
exactly. No, he was a Republican.
You're right. I'm
speaking of the present day
Yes.
Democrats that you could call the greedy party, or irresponsibly greedy party.
As you know, I'm not a Republican, but I do, if I have to vote in terms of the two parties,
Right.
that's one of the parties I most often would vote for. But I have been, for the presidential election, not voted for any Republican for the last, since 1992.
Right.
Not once. But I have voted for local Republicans
Right.
in the state. Of course, the Republican Party is essentially dead in the state. But one of the things I want to talk about
Okay.
is the definition of responsibility, which is really the core of my belief here.
Right.
And what it means.
All right.
What do you think it means? Is it important to have responsibility instilled within our young people and also within our adults, young adults, and also
Absolutely.
adults?
Well, the whole
And how
society.
do we perpetuate that?
Well, you For example, I was thinking of a minor little thing. It's indicative. It's a kernel of a large cereal box, if you will. I remember being on the bus when 20 years ago, there were high school kids acting up on the bus. In the earlier day, the bus driver would have told them to behave or get off the bus. And no one seemed to do anything. We question that.
Yes, right.
No one seemed to do anything. And I think part of it was fear.
Upbringing, obviously.
Well, I think the whole, you see, I think the whole society participates. And I think, you know, Democrats, they're there, but the Republicans, the marketing, the more you allow other people, including the market, to control your life, advertising to control how you think, I think it becomes a societal problem. I don't think it's a Democrat or Republican. I think if you want to call it a advertising consumer society problem. I think it's narrowed to the criticism of the Democrats is sometimes they can be too much for the victim and not enough for the victimized. I go along with that. No one is without flaw. But I find the society as a whole being run by consumer and advertising very easy to manipulate people.
That's a great example you brought up because it illustrates a number of things. In fact, it's getting worse than better. Then not only the bus driver doesn't have control of the students, they also have installed cameras in buses.
I wasn't aware of that.
Oh yes, they have installed cameras in buses because some of the students were having sex on buses.
Really?
Yes. I have 3 file cabinets of articles. I've had to go electronic.
And how many out of how many?
Well,
I mean, there are,
it's a
let's
small
say,
percentage.
100. That's right.
But the point is having students on a bus admiring a girl giving a boy oral sex is a serious decline in, if you want to use morality, which I hardly ever use, because I don't need that to discuss the issue.
Well, let's just even say it's inappropriate behavior on a bus.
Right. But it is
much like screaming and being rude
That's
to
correct.
People. And
but you mentioned the Republicans, who I will defend only when I think is appropriate. That some marketing is causing that. Well, one of the causes. One of the agencies is the ACLU. The ACLU goes in to monitor all kinds of activities to give students free speech. That is, in my day, and maybe your day, you could not wear a T-shirt. There was dress codes in school systems. Now we can't apply dress codes.
Why?
Why?
Is it a bad law?
No, it's because the towns, and I was a school committee member.
Go on.
They will not be able to do that, only because, first of all, the parents in the school system don't want it. Yet in Lawrence, they do have a dress code.
Right.
Because they're afraid of gang colors. Well, there aren't any gang colors in this town, so it's not as much of a concern.
Now, can I protest that if I go to a job? Or do I just get fired?
Well, employment is a different issue.
Why?
Because we're talking about adults. We're talking about children under the age of consent, which is 18.
Yeah, but their parents are responsible for them, are they not?
Well, they are, but I'm pointing out to you what's happened here in terms of where we're going.
Happened.
Is the ACLU is an agent of causing the issue about students can do anything they want to do because the school systems are fearful of lawsuits by the ACLU.
And so, once again, I just, you know, if people don't take action against something they feel is wrong, are they not as much to blame? You can, you know, you can.
There's no question.
You can talk about 15. You know, I want 15 wives or partners. If people just sit quietly and let it happen.
That's true. But let's let's go back to another point, which is, it's the Republicans' marketing. Okay.
No, the Republicans is the advertising companies to make money.
Who do you? Okay, the advertising and profanity and all these things are controlled by the FCC in the United States government.
Go on.
And that standard that we had 20, 30 years ago is being changed left and right. In fact, remember Janet Jackson with the
I
malfunctional
actually
wardrobe?
missed that.
Well, it happened. They were fined, CBS was fined, I believe it was CBS, about $500,000. They finally went up through
For
the
a
courts.
breast.
Right.
But you can murder millions of people on TV every week, and apparently that's fine. Okay, go on.
And then you have other rules which are being eroded continually by
Such
people
as?
who do not want to have any restriction whatsoever.
So, example. This is too general for me. I can't
Okay,
think
well,
in abstractions.
I get a lot of information showing actual programs, and then I respond to them because of the fact that they are, quote, inappropriate. Not only language, okay, foul language, but also actions.
Such
Sex, sexual activities, and all of these activities,
It sells. That's why you see it.
it may sell, but we used to have control. The FCC and FTC used to have control. Federal Communications Commission used to have
Right, I
control.
remember the 50s.
Those
and I remember-
standards are now being eroded left and right to the point where they do not stand. So if there's any group, the only group willing to stand up for those standards are not any liberal Democrat. It is the Republicans who are willing, and the Christian organizations to support them are willing to do that.
You see, you talk about these issues, and I'm not going to particularly disagree. I find a lot of it a little out there. But I see it as a cultural, I think there's a definite cultural problem, and I don't know that the Democrats are particularly any more responsible than anyone else.
Well,
Possibly
let me
even less so,
Okay.
because the culture. I remember speaking with.
Trying to get to more subjects, excuse me for a
Okay, go
moment.
ahead.
What we're going to do is, as I indicated, we'll make a note of where we diverge.
All right, that's fine.
And
Let's.
I
we
hope
can
that
move
you
along.
can get your data, I have my data, and come back and just to try to resolve a little bit more of that.
Okay, go on.
You feel that they're equally responsible. I feel that 99% of it is the responsibility of liberal Democrats.
I know you do.
Okay. Let's go back into the next part of
The
it.
next,
As far as
the next
responsibility.
conversation must
Yeah.
be, what do we think the whole purpose of government is?
Well,
I think if we start
I
at the
never
beginning,
answered
we
my
might get up.
definition of what I felt responsibility is. Responsibility, first of all, is fairness. And each person will not, quote, milk the system any more than somebody else will who shouldn't. I'm not talking about disabled people, like welfare, for
No,
example.
understood.
Welfare for people who are disabled cannot do the right things in terms of work and otherwise. They are not being discussed by me. I'm talking about people who are competent, etc. And responsibility also is very important for bringing up children, because even though it is expensive to have irresponsible, it's even more expensive to raise children who are irresponsible, because we multiply that tremendously.
Fine, fine.
So we both agree on responsibility in terms of what it means.
No, we don't.
Oh, okay.
I understand what you're saying, but you see responsibility, one, in terms of behavior, and two, in terms of cost.
Yes. So where do we
And
differ?
I want to know responsibility to what, to whom, to, is it a cultural displacement because culture has degenerated and therefore the responsibility is degenerated? I don't think it's quite as easy for such a simple word. I think the definition of it in a cultural context is quite complex on a certain level. You can take specific things, and I don't know if responsibility is fair.
All right, let's go into the next subject, which we
Okay.
will discuss more responsibility.
Go on.
Our first subject is welfare. And the
Yes.
example I brought up was we had 17 teenagers, young ladies in Gloucester who got pregnant.
That's right.
And the principal there was chastised for even mentioning a comment, making a comment that was somewhat like a pact. It was very unusual to have 17, where before that there may have been 1 or 2 teenagers per year.
Right.
Because of that, unfortunately, he was chastised by the superintendent, and he was actually forced out of the school system. A person who was really a great teacher, a great principal,
That was
according to...
bizarre. That was PC at its worst.
Well, thank you. I agree. And the reason I say that he was a great principal is that I only know that by people who live in Gloucester who made that comment
Right.
about how difficult it was to get along with the town, with the city, with the mayor, and also with the superintendent
What was
because
he
of this.
supposed to say?
Well, he made that comment. He felt it was.
I remember
Yeah.
that.
And they wanted to say it was completely independent. So that was a politically incorrect statement he made, and so
Uh-huh.
he's punished for it.
Well, you see, thought police, I mean, you may associate them, it seems you do, with the Liberal Democrats, where to me, thought police are thought police. They come from everywhere, and the political correctness can be very tedious. And, you know, the academics, from my point of view, can be some of the worst thought police.
I don't want to diverge
Keep
from
going,
it,
keep
but
going.
it's very
Just
important.
cut me off
no,
and
no,
move along.
no.
That's fine.
Your comment about thought police fits into a current bill that's going to be voted on by the Congress called the Hate Crimes Bill.
Aha.
Strictly putting on additional punishment because of what they think you thought when you committed that crime. So if you assault someone and they felt that you were anti-Hispanic or some other reason, anti-gay or whatever it is, then you will be given extra punishment for that perception that people have of you.
Oh, why punish them? Send them to thought school.
Right. But right now, the hate crimes law, which would be one that I would think that you would be against because you were just saying about the thought police.
Yes, well, it sounds like, you know,
So check
the
into
Cultural Revolution, doesn't it? Where you can only say Mao is wonderful.
Absolutely right. So,
But
I
they
guess,
should be, you know, crimes that are not revengeful. They're just random crimes. I do think should be punished a little more than vengeful crimes because it's such a random occurrence.
Well, they do have laws. For example,
I mean-
first-degree murder. If they find that you actually planned this and
Oh,
you
no,
had
I know.
notes and
First,
everything
second,
else,
third, yeah.
you would get punished. Now, why aren't these laws good enough? There's second degree and there's homicide, where you get into a fight and one of the people dies.
Right.
So there is different grades depending on somewhat of premeditation.
Well, it's called intimidation.
Kind of.
People want to erase everything negative in society through law.
Right.
And it simply won't happen.
So based on what I hear you say, is that you're a little questioning about this hate crimes law that they're trying to pass.
Well, it's like I think Osama bin Laden should be treated as a criminal, period.
Right,
Why complicate the universe? He's a criminal.
right. Anyway,
Instead of have a war against
check the
most of
crime.
the world.
Check that hate crimes law because we can engage in that conversation.
Oh, how fun.
In
Okay.
fact, we can come next weekend because this is going along very nicely, I feel. We have a lot of things to talk
Okay, now
about.
let's talk about the Gloucester girls
Yes,
and
go ahead.
welfare.
Go ahead.
Okay, now this was an interesting thing you wrote. If you want to control an activity, you place the responsibility. I'm crossing out to others because I don't think it has to be to
All right, it
others.
could be
To
anybody.
a thing.
Yeah,
It
okay.
could be to a thing.
So I
God
wrote,
even.
if you
for
want to control an
example.
activity,
You know
you
that?
displace the responsibility, which is not the right way, to others, and it's, right, okay,
Or to God.
right.
Or to some believed creature.
You
Okay.
don't, no, that's not the correct, I'm sorry, I forgot to put don't. If you want to control an activity, you don't want to displace the responsibility, have that person displace the responsibility of something else. Is that?
No, if you want to control an activity, you displace the responsibility. If people don't have responsibility, they
Right,
won't
okay,
have control.
good enough. It
That's
could have been better
perfectly
worded.
logical.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's say a
You
girl
do
gets,
agree with that?
It's not an agreement or a disagreement. It's a manipulative force. You know,
how would
if
you-
then, if you want to control, then you displace responsibility.
Okay,
It's almost
let's look at these
algebraic.
17 girls.
That's very good. Okay, what do we do? They're 15 years old,
Right.
they're pregnant. Okay, where is the sperm? Where did it come from? Are they virgin
Equally
births?
responsible.
Okay, have they caught, you know,
They
got
hardly
down
ever
the
go
boys?
after. What's happened in the past is either some of these men may be indigent, but the girl will not finger point the boys. That's another problem. They do
Well-
not cooperate with the police.
Understood. They don't want
So
to
what do
get
you
the
do in
boy
that
into
case?
trouble.
Right.
Well, the child, assume you can get possibly permission from some of the parents to get the DNA. Anyway,
I like your
that's the-
thinking. I like your thinking.
But
Yes,
the point
you're
is,
trying
they should be the males
should
I
be
feel,
equally
should be
responsible.
equally close
I
to
agree.
equally, close
Exactly.
to equally. But nonetheless, whether they're equally responsible or not, they should partake in the support of the child. I don't have, that
Right.
to me is old
Unfortunately,
stuff.
it's displaced to others, which is us, because they get welfare.
Okay, now what should we do in a case like this? I'm not against welfare. I want to point that out very, very clearly.
I'm not saying you
I am
are.
not at all
Right.
opposed to welfare.
What I'm saying is that, first of all, the
Why can't-
responsibility resides with the person, number one. You can never...
She's a 15-year-old child.
Still,
yes,
there's
she
some
has some
responsibility.
responsibility.
Correct.
Okay,
Second?
the parents are responsible for this child
Okay, you
until
hit
she's
the
18.
second thing here is family. I have three of
Right,
them enrolled.
you do.
The family is responsible.
Right.
Then the next
They could
level,
get
layer,
age-dependent children.
greater family, relatives.
Extended family,
Right,
it's
extended
called.
family.
Yeah,
Then the town,
that's
then the
right.
state, and the federal government.
Yeah, that's fine. That about works. Old people are just a good example for this.
Unfortunately, what we're doing is undermining all of that.
How?
Okay?
How
Give
are
an
we
example.
doing that?
In Chelsea,
No, I want to deal with these
That's right.
foster girls.
all right, doesn't make a difference, but I'm giving you a completely analogous example.
All right.
Chelsea had welfare, which had to be taken care of by the town, the city of Chelsea.
All right.
In the mid-'60s, all of a sudden,
That's the worst
state
time.
assumed
Okay.
it.
All right.
They displaced the responsibility now to the state.
Right.
And believe it or not, if you may remember, in the last 10 years, you remember that the government was giving out grants to states to handle their welfare. So it actually went up to the federal government.
Right.
So here you have the key people who, in any business, and I make the business
Go on.
example, is that if you want to control an activity, you bring it down to the lowest level where that activity occurred.
Local responsibility.
Right, local responsibility. And that's why I put that example as I did.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're doing more and more displacement of responsibility to others who are not even connected with this.
This is true.
This is bad. To me, it's bad. What do you think of that?
I think the people closest to the situation know the situation
You
the
agree
best.
in that sense.
Yeah.
It should be a community problem, but we're going in the wrong direction.
It should be a community problem, but it can be assisted in very poor neighborhoods
Right.
from the federal government.
But do you know who promotes what I just mentioned?
What?
Liberal Democrats.
They promote what?
They promote the displacement responsibility to the federal government. They want that.
I don't see how A went to B.
I went to,
Sorry.
well, what I'm just saying is that
The federal government gives the money to the community.
to the state. In other
the
words,
state.
the Republicans, when
Can't
they
the state give the money to the community?
they are. Right now,
Yes.
for example, in
So
Massachusetts,
what's the problem?
what I'm just saying is that when the Republicans went into power, they gave the states complete responsibility. They said, we'll give you
Right.
control. We're not taking any money from you. You keep that money. We'll give you
Right.
the money that you gave to us.
Right.
The Democrats don't want that.
What
They
do they
want to
want?
have the government continue on with that. And Obama's,
What are you saying? That they want the people in the state or the states to give the money to the feds and the feds give it back?
that's what they do. Sometimes they don't. What they want to do is actually control behavior or welfare from the federal government.
You absolutely lost me. It was simply too abstract. I want an absolute example.
Well, the example is when I was just telling you that before the Republicans were in there, the government actually controlled welfare to some extent, to a large
The
extent.
state.
No, the federal,
feds.
the feds were in there. And what happened when the Republicans came in, they said, we want to give grants to the states. We don't want to be in this business. It's really not our responsibility.
Okay.
You should handle it on a state level.
Okay. And you give grants.
Correct. Block grants, they call them. The Republicans
go
did
on.
this.
All right.
They were the conservative components, while the Liberal Democrats, who installed this government control or aspect of the welfare payments to extend, not all of the money, but a substantial amount,
Right.
they want to promote big government, and this is what they want. They want to control this aspect of the business.
Well, I'd have to.
We have only
I
about
can't have
4
an
minutes.
opinion on that because I don't know enough.
All right. Well, here's another.
Can I just mention this because
Yes.
we talked about this briefly. You were talking at some point earlier about, not the show, immigration. And I just had ideas about immigration, that there are, according to the Center of Immigration Studies, there are 12 million
Right now, we
immigrants
only
in
have
this country. Oh, okay.
only have 2
All
minutes
right.
left.
And I think we should find the employers. You like hitting on the vulnerable, it seems to me
I want to
often.
hit the employers as bad as anybody else
I
wants
want to hit them worse.
That's fine. It's fine with me. In fact, I want to have the same income tax for the rich people that Clinton had. I'm going to throw them under the bus because 52% of these rich people voted for Obama. They're not helping me out. As far as I'm concerned, they should pay a higher amount of taxes.
Helping you out. You, John Russo?
Helping out in terms of reestablishing responsibility.
Which we still have to define more clearly.
Correct. And we will do that another time. And I want to thank you very much for coming.
Yes, it
We
goes
have a
by
very-
very
A
quickly.
very studied approach. We'll continue on, and we'll be off the camera here, but we'll continue on how we're going to proceed because I find conversations very important. We have found places where we differ, and now we have to get more data to establish that point of maybe joining or not. There were points that we agreed with, and other points are not, and so we have to be aware of what those differences are.
Yes, indeed.
So we'll start off next time, and hopefully we'll come back again, and we will.
I'll look at the DVD first.
Yes, right. All right. Fine. Look at the DVD, and I hope to come back. We're off the air now, aren't we? Okay. Oh, 3 more minutes.
3 more
But
minutes.
no, that's okay. We'd like to kind of
Times to
finish
discuss
off
my
tidy.
program here. No.
We'll
I'm
get
sorry.
you here another time.
No,
Otherwise,
it's funny. It's a joke. Go
That's
on.
all right. We need to establish some examples, and I think really the best way of going at this is giving solid, concrete examples
do too.
and data of where these things are happening. Like, for example, in the school buses, you weren't aware of the sexual activities going on in the school
Oh,
system.
but that's, sexual activities seem to go on anywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but not
On the
this is-
steps of the Capitol, even by our
Well,
representatives.
they're right, but we've gone out in the wrong direction in that sense. And I would like to have your statement about: are we declining as a nation? Are our practices
Okay,
such?
what's very interesting is, with all the promiscuous sex, so-called, that went on during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, what's interesting that I find in talking to young generation people is, the allure of all this is over. They actually want to establish stable relationships. And I think America, we have so much. Now people are talking about simplicity. So the opposite will breed its opposite to a large extent. And I think America's very gifted that way because it can afford to experiment.
Let me give you a fact. 40% of all children are born fatherless. The highest ever, and it's increasing.
Well,
Not my
let's see.
stats.
Are these children born of the artificial insemination? Are these children? I mean, we need a little
Regardless,
more
they're
info.
fatherless. When you say there's more committed relationships, well, they may be committed to a drug. They may be committed to in vitro relationships. I don't
No,
call
I
that.
want to see more. I find some of your statistics. I may be wrong.
Well, let me tell you
Possibly
that I
skewed.
can give you.
There's nothing
I
easier
can
to
give you
skew
multiple
than
sources
statistics.
for that. That 40% of
Well,
all
I'll
children.
take the census. That's the statistic I will take. Is
You
the
do your
census.
research. That 40% are born out of wedlock, which is contrary to what you're saying, that the more people are more stable and things. One of the fastest
Younger generations.
one of the
They're
fastest
just
growing
beginning to breed.
forms of marriage in the United States is cohabitation. One of the fastest growing.
Done. Are we done? Huh? 30 seconds.
One of the fastest growing units of marriage are
Is
cohabitating
cohabitation.
couples. Right.
So sounds okay.
No commitment. They can leave anytime they want. So when you mean that's okay, and yet you're saying you want
Well,
committed
once
relationships.
children come in, then we deal with a different issue. But cohabiting without issue,
Families cohabitating,
families.
Right.
Do
It's
they
one of the-
write some kind of wills or some kind of protection?
Well, I don't know what it is, but the
Why
point...
do they need marriage as long as
Well,
the
that's
children
right.
are
Well,
protected?
see, you said that you want stable relations.
What does marriage mean? Stable?
It should mean a commitment.
It should.
Okay?
Why can't they be committed outside of marriage?
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't. Gee.
If they're afraid to
Since
say
when?
I do,
Are you speaking as an observer, or are you speaking
I'm
as...
speaking as someone who reads lots of... We're off the air anyway.
Okay.
No.
Are we off the air? Well, that was a good way to get it off,
you're right.
arguing away.
But I'm speaking of a number of different people and books I read. And
I'd love to know the books you read, because you
I
come up
read
with
the
these
Globe.
strange things.
Well, I'd like you to point that out to me, because I read the
Well,
Globe.
the 40%, I'll just write that down and check.
40% of all children today are born out of wedlock.
And we'll see how unstable it is.
Do you agree that 70% of all children in the black families are grown
I don't know.
fatherless?
And you see, I don't care if they're married before the law or not. What I care about is what actually goes on.
What's going on is they're fatherless.
I care about what actually goes on. Are they truly fatherless?
Yes.
Or are they listed as families as fatherless to get benefits
no,
they may not
no.
otherwise get?
No. The statistic about black families...
I would love to know why, because they were so much more stable before.
Absolutely. During the 50s, 5% of the families were fatherless.
Yeah, and
The blacks had about 20%.
Yeah, well, given that their family was ripped asunder,
But it's changed to 70%, 65 to 70%.
Yeah, well.
Multiple sources.
No, okay. No, that's fine. It's worth examining intelligently.
Exactly.
One makes you wonder if there's a white conspiracy, doesn't it? To destroy
Yes, there
black
was.
families.
There was. Called the Liberal Democrats.
Aha.
They
I don't
encouraged
think so.
welfare.
Yeah.
I know this.
I know what you're saying.
They encouraged welfare, and you
I
remember
know the
Daniel Patrick
arguments.
Moynihan?
Yep, I do.
What did he do during the time he was here, during the welfare actions?
Right. He was trying to create.
During the 60s and 70s, he said, you allow families only to get welfare without having a man in the
That's right.
family. You're going to promote.
Not only that. Yes, exactly.
He was a Democrat, but he was smart enough to realize this was going to destroy the black family, and guess what? It did.
Well, in Iceland, you can get money without being married, and a lot of the girls do.
But we're looking at the
And they
results.
live with the guy, where you know what the welfare department in New York did? It would go into a black family's house and go, maybe a white family's too, and go through the closets to make sure there wasn't a man hiding. You know?
Right.
Anyway.
It's a very great societal problem that is causing costs and also pain and suffering for children living in those organizations, living in those groups, because those same children in the black inner cities are the next generation gang members, are the next generation non-school going children, which we know there are quite a few.
Given a great many of them may be black, but there are also lots and lots of whites, and lots of Hispanics, and lots of Asians.
Not lots and lots of Asians. You're mistaken. You're mistaken. The
Well,
Asians
okay,
perform.
Go to the West Coast.
Yeah,
Go to the
in
West Coast.
that's a
because
different
go to
story.
Vancouver,
Yeah, in
Because all the ignorant Asians are being brought in
all the
from
stats.
Hong Kong.
Yeah, all
and
the.
there's big
All right.
problems with the Asian gangs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Mr.
Asian
Russo.
gangs are
It was
tremendous.
Nice meeting you,
Nice
Carolyn.
meeting you too.
Yeah.
And I do let me get my DVD. I have no idea. I think we meandered a little
He's
too much.
producing them right now. You think it'll take a while for you to duplicate them, won't it?